Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It's 3 p.m. here in the UK and 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. Welcome to the start of another week. Who can believe it's Monday already? I hope you all had a great weekend doing whatever you were doing. For those of you that joined us last week, you'll recall that on our Fun Friday edition, we were joined by Clive Room, covering a whole range of diverse subjects, including a bit of a history lesson as we embarked on our 80s theme that day. This week, we'll be celebrating May Day on Friday with special guest Alex Scrutton from Computer Weekly, so please do make sure you tune in then too. We were also joined, you may remember, by a host of other guests, including John Noble, CBE, who is non-executive director at NHS Digital. And he stopped by to talk to us about the phenomenal work that's being done right now to digitally secure and support the health service. Now, all of those shows are available on demand at nominetcyber.com/0dayslive. So if you are not able to join the shows live, or indeed the whole of the shows, then please do pick those up at your leisure. Now, today we are welcoming back special guest Donna Leslie, Director of Talent and Culture at Clarabridge, and also new guest Marilise de Villiers, who is founder and CEO of MVDB Consulting, who has, among other things, written a number of publications on culture, organisational change and cybersecurity. We'll be speaking to both of them shortly as we explore our theme today, which is remote working 1 month on. But before that, a quick welcome from me. I'm Stuart Reed and I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. As usual, I'm in the chair to welcome our special guests each and every day of our live shows. And just a quick reminder, Nominet is primarily known for being responsible for managing the .uk domain name, which we've been doing successfully now for over 23 years and have something in the order of 15 million domains currently under management. Building on this strong heritage of understanding the importance of domain names and connectivity for networks, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks, including providing service to the UK government's National Cybersecurity Centre. And ensuring people are able to be connected, included and secure is at the heart of what we do at Nominet. And that is perhaps more important now than ever, with the fact that physical events, meetings and one-to-ones are on pause right now. We wanted to bring together an interactive show to kind of bridge that gap left behind by some of those activities. And we have brought you to 0 Days Live, and it's really for everybody with an interest in or from within the cybersecurity community. I'm joined both front of house and behind the scenes here with a highly capable team, making sure that everything runs just the way it should, and getting it back on track if it doesn't. And speaking of tracks, this week's burning question is, what is your favorite what is your favorite isolation tune and why? A bit of a tongue twister. So please do let us know. Now, for me, today, it has to be the Levelers' What a Beautiful Day, because it's pretty upbeat and it's an ideal way to kick off the new week. Steve, talking about kicking off the new week, what is your isolation tune of choice?
My isolation tune of choice, going with the 80s theme, although I'm not sure it was actually recorded in the 80s, is Faith by George Michael, because I think we've got to have faith in a lot of things at the moment just to keep us going every day.
Excellent, very good choice. Thank you for that, Steve. I don't think it was in the 80s, but close enough. It was a while ago. So thank you very much for that contribution, Steve. And for everyone at home, please also do let us know what yours is. And of course, the show really isn't the same without you all tuning in and joining us each and every day. And we're delighted every day to be welcoming both our regulars and also new audience members as we build an accessible community to bring people together, hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, share some thoughts on best practice, and of course, interject some good humour along the way. We cover a lot of important subjects, but we are very careful not to take ourselves too seriously. And as a quick reminder, for each of our 30-minute or so shows, we are absolutely live each and every day. As such, there is bound to be and have already been some mild blips along the way, but when they do happen, we hope you agree it's just part of the natural authenticity of the show. So please do get involved. If during today's show or any of the other live shows that you join, you want to ask a question or give us a comment, please do so using the console on your screen, and Kerry will read them out during today's webcast. And speaking of Kerry, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Jolly good. Trust you had a nice weekend.
Yeah, it's lovely and sunny. Very.
It was indeed. And so speaking of lovely sunny stuff, what is your favourite isolation tune and why?
Well, I had a thinking about the theme of today. Obviously, it's Insights Monday, so I've gone with something insightful from my music collection. Temper Trap, Sweet Disposition. So every time this comes on my isolation playlist, it just transports me back to 10 years ago when I was lucky enough to work on a charity project in Africa, renovating a school in Tanzania. And it was just such an amazing experience. It just really transports me back into doing something incredibly different. And unfortunately, something that we're not able to do at the moment, but hopefully the world will come good again and projects like that can continue for other people.
Excellent. A very, very thorough and thought through tune selection there today. Appreciate that. And again, just a quick reminder, everyone tuning in, please do also let us know what your tunes are and we'll read them out during the course of the show. As I mentioned a few moments ago, we have a panel discussion today to revisit the subject of our first ever 0 Days Live, where we were talking about the new normal for working, which of course for most now is working from home. And we're exploring both the impact on well-being and also on maintaining good cybersecurity hygiene. 4 weeks on since we had that first show, and we're going to revisit the theme to see if anything's changed. So I'm really pleased to introduce to the show our returning guest, Donna Leslie, and also Marilise de Villiers. Welcome back, both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Hi there, good to see you. Hi there, Marilise.
Hi there.
Good stuff. Well, I'm very excited to have you both on the show today. So thank you very much for joining us. Now, before we do move on to what's a very important subject of kind of the remote working and how things are working out for people right now, I would like to know from both of you, what is your favorite isolation tune and why? So let's start with you, Marilise. What's yours?
So it's a song called Roots. So if I sort of look on my Spotify, it's a beautiful kind of front cover where it's a big tree with kind of its roots visible, and then there's some butterflies, and it's kind of like you know, just quite like a really it's like you said earlier, like a very upbeat song. It's Valerie Broussard and Galantis. So I'm probably not even pronouncing that properly, but I think it's really for me very apt, because it is this whole idea that I'm almost like finding my roots again in terms of, you know, sort of connecting with my family here at home, and actually just realizing how much I actually enjoy being home and all the sorts of things that I can do around the house. It's almost like really kind of being rooted, and I'm finding a lot of my sort of daily routine is also around kind of rooting myself so that I set myself up for the day.
Excellent, good stuff. Well, I'm going to look that one up and add it to my playlist. Thank you very much for that, Marilise. What's yours, Donna?
So mine is something that I've rediscovered at the start of all of this, going through Spotify, as a lot of people have been, and it's called September by Earth, Wind and Fire. And there's no real reason why, other than it's a great upbeat tune. You can probably find me dancing around my kitchen every morning while I'm waiting for my coffee, just to energize me and get me going, ready for the day. So yeah, nothing too profound about it. It's just an upbeat song that puts a smile on my face. Excellent,
good. And what better way to start the week than having some upbeat songs? So thank you both for those, and thank you again for joining us. Let's kind of move on to today's discussion, and as part of that, probably helpful for the audience just to understand a little bit about each of you and what your area of focus is. So Donna, if I start with you, remind everyone who wasn't able to join us on our very first show who you are and your company.
Yeah, so I'm Director of Talent and Culture at Clarabridge, which is a customer feedback management platform. I've been with the company about 4 years, global workforce, HQ'd out of Reston, Virginia, and main focus is really on everything to do with HR across the business, across all of our global offices.
Excellent, thank you. And Marilise, how about yourself?
I run my own business, MVDB Consulting, and it's very much where I focus on people and culture. So really around strategy and at the moment really focusing a lot in cybersecurity. So I've sort of been doing people and change for 20 years, but the last 8 years moved into cyber. And sort of the easiest way to think about what I do is really, if you think about the human aspects, it's holistic safety and security, so physical, cyber, and also psychological safety and security. So I'm very, very big on the psychology and you know, what do we do to actually embed secure mindsets and habits into organizational cultures. And there's a lot of psychology, and I'm really passionate about that. And that's also why I wrote my book. I published a book earlier this year. It's called Roar, as an alliance, Roar. And it's a book that encourages people to speak up. Really, the context is workplace bullying. So I call that out. I say it's a silent epidemic. But it's really picking up on that psychology and fear-based cultures and recognizing that we have a problem and that we've got to empower people to kind of speak up.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for the overview, both of you. And clearly what you've highlighted there, Marilise, is there's lots of kind of layers to kind of not just the remote working, but organizations in general. So we'll touch on more of that in a moment. But Donna, if I come back to you first, in some ways, it's really hard to believe it's that we spoke for the first time on what was then our brand new show, talking about the new normal of everyone, or primarily everyone, working from home or remote working, and that's kind of strange situation that we found ourselves in. What do you think's changed over that past month? Are we struggling as much as we thought we might?
I actually don't think we are. I think we underestimated how resilient and adaptable to change people and organisations can be and have been. I think, yes, there have been some challenges, but in the main, the transition has been relatively smooth. People are coping. And I know when we spoke previously, as you say, it feels like a lot longer than 4 weeks ago. But I talked about technology not being that one-dimensional tool, and I think we've seen the significant benefits in the transformation to a digital and connected workplace. And what we're really seeing is when we empower and care for employees and people, they can adapt, they can do amazing things. We just need to make sure that we give them the tools, the time, and the culture to succeed. And I think there's been huge innovations as we've done this, and very quickly as well, that I don't think the struggle has been as significant as maybe we trepidly thought it could be when we entered this 6-7 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you. And one thing that I found when we spoke before that was particularly interesting actually during our previous conversation was that it was appearing that more senior members of the team are becoming much more kind of, or seen as being more humanized, I suppose, as they are also kind of in the thick of it and tackling with their co-workers and kind of co-working their personal lives, professional lives, and combining those things together. I thought it was a really interesting point. Do we think it's something that both senior management and the wider workforce have become more comfortable with in the last month or so?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, what we're definitely seeing, and to your point, looking at, you know, people when they don't feel safe, supported, or emotionally secure, they just don't feel engaged. And this has been something that from an HR perspective has always been on the agenda, the well-being, the humanized approach, but it really is now a top priority for businesses, and we're seeing that from the top down. We're getting this sort of unique look into our colleagues' lives. We're seeing our CEO sat with his dog at his table, or we're seeing our managers balancing with their children. And I think having that opportunity to really see a different perspective of your colleagues is definitely building stronger working connections, which I think can only be for a better benefit.
And Marilise, if I bring you in here, if I may, at this point, I mean, from what you've just heard there, do you think this, or is this your experience rather, does it have advantages from a workplace perspective, do you think, as well?
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with everything Donna says. You know, I think it's it's almost like this has been sort of more of an equalizer. So, suddenly we're engaging, but we all feel like, we're equals. We not necessarily have the hierarchy that we typically have when you have, a meeting where you're kind of all around the table, and also typically when you have kind of a global setup and you have, maybe a team having to dial into a meeting where you've got 10 people in the room, I know it's been historically really difficult for the people on the phone to feel that connection, but this is almost now kind of leveled it out, so that we're all equal and we all sort of engage on that sort of equal footing, and it's been really good, I think, really positive.
And Marilise, I know you specialise in the kind of the human aspects of cybersecurity as well, and clearly that's a very important element here, because we covered a lot around the kind of the well-being aspects, which clearly are front and centre of your perspectives right now. But there's also that kind of weaving in of other ancillary areas, such as the kind of the more human aspects of how that interacts with cybersecurity, for example. What do you think the culture within cyber has, or how it will change as a result of this?
Do you mean the culture of the cybersecurity team, or do you mean the culture of the organisation as a whole as it pertains to cybersecurity?
I think probably more as the wider organisation, because I guess everyone has now been, at least a month immersed into what is a remote situation, and so their kind of day-to-day lives have, whether they are prepared for it or not, completely now reliant on a level of digitization, which of course with it brings its own kind of risks to an organisation and from a cyber perspective.
So the reason I clarify that, Stuart, is just because I always distinguish between security culture and kind of organizational culture, because I don't believe we are creating a security culture. It's a subtle nuance, but it's more about embedding the mindsets and habits into the organizational culture, so it becomes part and parcel of the way we work, because the organization already has a culture. I think what this has done, and it's really been almost everything's been magnified, and so the awareness is now so much better, and people interacting with Zoom and the recent kind of security challenges with Zoom, and how people are actually now latching on to the importance of the security, but it's not kind of treated as something separate in a box anymore. It's part of the strategic conversation, it's part of the business conversation. It's becoming part of our language in terms of how we speak, and so the awareness is really, really shot up, and I just think people are feeling a lot more empowered, around cybersecurity, that it's just part and parcel of the technology and the way we work.
And I think that distinction is actually really, really valid to draw out, because it is not necessarily around creating, as you say, a culture around cybersecurity, but it's more around weaving cybersecurity as part of that culture and making it appropriate to how that company or organization's risk posture evolves. Donna, is that your experience as well, or are you seeing something different from Clarabridge's perspective?
No, I think I completely agree with everything that Marilise said. I think individuals are becoming a lot more adept at technology, but they're also becoming a lot more aware, and that's not just in the workplace. It's some of the new tools that have been created very quickly to create those virtual connections, whether that's a house party with your friends or some other technology that sort of has seemed to have come out of nowhere, and then you're getting the reports around the security aspects. I think it's definitely bringing an awareness to individuals from a personal perspective, but they're then translating into the workplace.
Great, and right on cue, for regulars of the show, you'll recognise that Steve does pop up at the most obscure times, and usually it's because he wants to raise his virtual hand to ask a pertinent question, or at least I hope so. What have you got for us today, Steve?
Completely different subjects. No, I just wanted to ask what you've seen as being the biggest challenge from the people you've been speaking to around the kind of home working situation and cyber. Marilise, be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
So I think you know, I think what we get a lot is the uncertainty. So let's take Zoom as an example. Suddenly you have very senior individuals in the organization having board meetings on Zoom, you know, and it's potentially very sensitive information that they discuss, and it's about, so how do we actually secure that meeting? How do we know there's no people kind of listening in, you know? So suddenly if there's this sort of I think it's the we don't know what we don't know, and so when you suddenly have a scenario when there's a security breach or an incident, you then suddenly have to say, oh my gosh, because people can very easily kind of say, oh, it's not relevant to me, and until it happens, right? So it's so real now, and everybody is affected. So I think it's that sort of the challenging thing has been the fear of the unknown and not knowing if you're exposed, because obviously when you're in a work setting and you're dialing in with a very secure VPN, you're pretty secure, you're pretty protected by the technology. But suddenly in a home setting, you don't necessarily have the same sort of controls in place, and that creates a lot of anxiety for people. And so most of the questions that I've seen coming through has been around, you know, suddenly people realize, oh gosh, this is impacting me. And Zoom is probably one of the best examples, recent examples. And how do I now protect myself?
And how do you think we can help individuals overcome that in terms of kind of, I guess, always being on the reactive side and then suddenly, you know, kind of panicking about some of these things?
So I think it is about the hygiene factors, and getting some of those hygiene factors in place. And I know it's the ever kind of boring subject of passwords, but there is some good kind of password hygiene practices, which goes a long way in terms of you protecting yourself. Even if you think about your router at home and changing the password on your router, you know, it's the not necessarily just saying change it, but showing you how to change it. And I think that's the difference between good and bad advice. It is about not just saying you've got to do this, but actually showing how to do it and getting people kind of almost like stepping them through it, you know, and having the guides and pointing to the guidance. And I think that's really key. So it's what are the sort of top 2 or 3 things that you can do to really kind of go 80% of the way and make a significant step change in your personal and obviously work safety as well. But I think more personal. I think people do tend to sort of care more about, you know, who's watching their kids, or, you know, who's chatting to their kids on, you know, on the PlayStation, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we've also heard a lot about the fact that video is now becoming the kind of predominant communication tool, but also a way of learning as well. And you've just described there that actually kind of stepping people through processes and how they do things, and the video is one of the best ways of doing that. That kind of certainly you start to see now why people are turning to video for those kind of educational aspects and talking through those things to actually see how you do those things practically, rather than just reading something online. Definitely. Donna, I was really interested to understand from your perspective, do we think that the changes that we've seen will stay, even when we head back to kind of office working in some way? Do you think there will be some long-lasting changes to the way that we work and the culture around that?
Yeah, I do. At least I hope they do. I think there's been a number of different learnings. There's been some positives that have been created over the past month, 2 months, that I really hope do translate back into the office. And that's, for example, I think we're definitely seeing this crisis has given us an increase in trust and transparency across the business, the flexibility. And I hope that, and I think with all of those, they've created a more productive workforce, a more engaged workforce, and a slightly more sort of collaborative and inclusive culture, whether, you know, not just from one particular office, but across these global companies. And I really think that some of those programs and do continue as we go back into the office and don't go away. A lot of hard work's gone into being creative and being innovative, that it would be a shame to see some of the outcomes of what those programs have provided go away overnight.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your questions, Steve. Thank you also to both Marilise and Donna on those as well. That's been insightful for us today in terms of what's happening next. I know that this is also a conversation that's resonating with our audience as well. So with that, Kerry, what have we got in coming from our audience?
Yes, so we have a good one here from Harrison saying, do you think that managers have enough experience of helping and training their reports, especially in this new remote environment?
Let's take that one to Marilise to start with then.
So I think, as I said, it's unlikely that COVID has created a problem that didn't exist before, right? So what COVID has done is it has magnified problems that the organizations already had. So if line managers or people managers do not have the skills and capabilities, it probably points to more of a historical problem. I have seen some real examples where we recognize that it's impossible, that we've got to invest more time with our people managers, and that we've actually got to provide them with more support to upskill them, to equip them to have these conversations. So you have a real mix. I've seen a real mix, but I think it's important that we do spend the extra time upskilling these individuals, because I don't think it's safe to make an assumption that people do have the skills and capabilities. Because a lot of this also starts with self-management and how you show up as a leader. So I think it's also important to help people to recognize, what are the sorts of things that they can do to also show up as the best version of themselves, around energy management, around productivity management. So it's not so much only about managing people, but it's also about managing self.
And Donna, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with Marilise. I don't think this is a new challenge. I think it has probably been magnified, and actually something that we have been doing over the past month within Clarabridge is looking at what our management development program currently, what is the content in there, and how can we adapt that? What have we learned from this situation? And I think something that we did maybe miss the boat on was we create a lot of programs that assumed that you were co-located with your direct reports. So definitely there'll be a focus on remote management from that perspective, and making sure that that is part of any training that we roll out. But I think as well, empathy, resilience, change management, that's definitely something that we need to get more focused on around some of the more softer skills, and making sure that those are reprioritized, given that they are such a priority within organizations now as well.
Great, thank you. Kerry, anything else coming in?
Yes, we have one from Mo. What's the best piece of advice for people working remotely and trying to juggle childcare, working lives, etc.?
Yeah, this is probably a common question that everyone's kind of battling with at the moment, that trying to manage family life and professional life. Donna, what's your thoughts on that?
So I think this question actually came up when we first spoke 4 weeks ago, and I don't think my advice has changed. I think it's still communication, setting those boundaries, communicating schedules, and being able to balance both as best you can. And if you can't, you need to share that information with your managers and with your teams. We are in a situation where there is a lot more patience. There's a lot more time for people to adjust and adapt. So this is really the great opportunity to raise any issues that you've got. But also on top of that, don't be too hard on yourself. This is difficult. Everybody appreciates that. Everybody expects that. And I think there's a lot of understanding around, so long as you communicate.
Great, thanks. And Marilise, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I completely, again, agree with Donna. I think so. So my kind of morning started with, I went for a run. Before that, I put the washing in the machine. I went for a run. Normally, I have someone that comes in that does it for me, but not at the moment, of course. I came back. I had to hang the washing up. I was 15 minutes late for my first meeting, which was at 8:15. And then I sort of obviously just had to be in meetings, but before that I had to get a shower. So it was just like manic morning, right? But it's the new norm now. But the thing that I had to prioritize this morning was my run, because I knew that if I was going to go for my run, I was going to set myself up for the day, and allowing myself that like hour of me time, not feeling guilty about it, but instead saying, you know, I'm going to prioritize me on my list of priorities today, and I'm actually going to schedule it, and I'm going to make it happen. Because I think it comes back to, Donna, you're saying not being hard on yourself, but also being gentle with yourself, you know, giving yourself the time and the compassion to actually re-energize, recuperate, because you've got to fill that tank, you know, to be able to do all the things around you as well. So yeah, so I would say my top tip, and the thing that I do is I do my sort of daily exercise / and meditation, you know, practices, and I do schedule it, I prioritize it.
Yeah, and I think actually that the theme of prioritization is one that's come up a lot here. So I think it's absolutely valid. And some of those things, just like some of the kind of ways that we would have scheduled things in our work lives before the current situation we're in, it just gives us a bit more discipline, perhaps, to schedule some of those other things in that we perhaps would have taken for granted before. So appreciate that. Anything else coming in from the audience, Kerry?
Yeah, so there's just one last one which actually came in when you were talking about your book, Marilise. So it's from Julie, and she says, as a softly spoken woman, she often struggles to get heard, especially remotely. What advice would you give?
Wow, that's an excellent question. So, I mean, again, I wouldn't say it's any sort of different in a virtual. I mean, I always say to people, you know, and I've had this myself as well. I'm not softly spoken, but even though I do say and I do give my point of view, sometimes, you know, it's sort of glossed over, and then someone, typically a male colleague, will repeat it later on, and then everybody would think it's an amazing idea, right? So we've had those sorts of challenges in the past. You know, I think Julie, I think it's important to recognize what's going on for you. Why are you holding back? Because obviously if you're not being heard, you're not necessarily coming forward, you know. So my book is all about finding your roar and having the inner confidence and the strength to speak up. So I think there is perhaps some sort of inner work, but there's also, how can you surround yourself with people that are supportive, that are also going to kind of almost be your cheerleaders, that are going to sort of, you know, when you make a point, they are going to reiterate it for you. So it's almost, you can contract with those people to say, you know, we're on a Zoom this morning, I've got this point to get across, can you just help me by reiterating the point, or can you just, you know, refer back to it in the conversation, so that you make sure that your point is being heard, but you don't try and tackle it on your own. You sort of, you work with colleagues and people that you trust that can help you get your message across. I hope that's helpful. It's a bit of a vague answer. It's a tough one. It's a really tough one.
Great, thank you very much for that insight, Marilise, and great questions coming in from the audience as well. So thank you very much for that. It's clearly a subject that's everyone can relate to right now, kind of the remote working piece. So thank you very much for anyone that's asked a question today, but also thank you to both Donna Leslie of Clarabridge and Marilise de Villiers of MVDB Consulting to give us your perspectives on the kind of situation that we're finding ourselves in, perhaps as we're moving forward into this new normal. So do appreciate your time for both of you today. We're almost out of time actually on today's show, but before we do wrap things up today, let's turn back over to Kerry to get a wash up of today's news. Kerry.
Thank you. Yes, so before I start the news, we've had a message in from Jim Rogers, who says that George Michael Faith was released in 1987. So it was the 80s.
In that case, I stand corrected. Steve, you were right. Well done.
Brilliant. Great. So some interesting headlines in the news today. ZDNet reports that account hijacking bug in Microsoft Teams caused by viewing GIFs. This flaw has now been fixed. Research and Security magazine has found that most UK workers haven't had cybersecurity training in over a year, yet 77% of workers stated that they're not worried about cybersecurity. And then finally, Davey Winder penned an interesting article in The Observer this weekend, sharing advice on staying in touch and secure while working from home. So that's worth a look.
Great, thank you very much. Again, some interesting headlines in the news today. Also, it seems that it kind of resonates a little bit with what we've been talking about today as well, particularly with Davy's article in the Observer. As it's interesting, it's picking up a lot of the themes that we've been talking about as part of today's discussion as well. Also, a little bit worrying to hear that so many UK workers don't seem to have had cybersecurity training in more than a year. Arguably, that is probably something that is more important now than perhaps it ever was before. So, I mean, security probably is something that should be considered as part of continuous and everyday work life, and certainly now more than ever, it's weaving into our everyday culture, as we talked about before. So that's it for today from a very special guest. I did notice that Steve has popped up once again though, so it means that we're not quite over for today. Steve, what insightful comment or question do you have now?
You know, I'm always looking for the positives in the news, Stuart, and I think one of the positives to come out of this is the focus on these remote communication tools like Zoom, like Teams, is obviously highlighting some of the areas of weakness of the tools, but that's helping to improve the security overall. And perhaps if we weren't focused on using those so much, we wouldn't have noticed those vulnerabilities and therefore kind of repair them and think about how we use them as our guests kind of talked about earlier. So I think there are some positives to come out of this, that we will be overall more secure going forwards because we've had such a focus on some of these tools, and some of the security researchers have obviously focused their efforts as well.
Actually, it is a really good point, Steve, because it has everything that we find ourselves in now has really helped sharpen the focus of some of those areas that perhaps wouldn't have come to the fore had we have not moved ourselves into this kind of enforced remote working situation. So I think it is a good point that we should actually continue to look for the positives that come out of this as well, and some of the best practices that are coming out of this that we can take into our everyday lives beyond this strange situation, and for the better, really. So I think that's an excellent point. So with that, that is it for today. Very special thanks to today's guest panelists, Donna Leslie and Marilise de Villiers, to everyone here front of house and also behind the scenes at 0 Days Live, and of course to you all for tuning in. Just a quick heads up that tomorrow is Tech Tuesday, where we'll be speaking to Jim Rees, Managing Director at Razorthorn, and we'll be talking about payment security. So until then, have a good rest of day and see you then. Goodbye.